There's the line in the series that she's like the Gen Z Sherlock Holmes.
This is like half my brain.
What does Gen Z mean when you're creating a character? Like, did that have a definition for who Darby is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the iPhone fucked me up.
Did you know LA Times called her Gen Z Sherlock Holmes?
I actually have no idea what Gen Z is. Is that my generation?
How does that change your brain or how does that form your brain? Because you're forming your mind then.
I just think of it as meaning like, I guess, young, relevant, clued up.
I went into this totally blind because I saw it was the two of you involved, did not want to see a trailer, didn't want to know anything about it because I knew, big fan of everything the two of you do, and very happy to see that this was awesome. Absolutely loved it.
That's so nice to hear, and I'm so glad you went into it blind. That's what we love to do, approach stories without knowing anything.
Exactly. And going back and rewatching the trailer after the fact, I kind of felt a little bit misled because looking at the trailers, I would think this is Girl with the Dragon Tattoo meets Hercule Poirot or something like that. But it's very different than that. It's very nuanced, and it's such a cool character-driven idea. But I have to ask, was it ever the vision for you when coming up with this to make this like an ongoing anthology type thing where it's Darby on the case, different cases in the future, or was this always envisioned as just one story?
Darby sort of came fully formed, and what was just very clear is that like she was a clear character, and that this first thing felt like a novel or a book we had to tell. This idea of Darby being invited to a tech billionaire's retreat, lost in the snow somewhere, and that story felt very much like it had a beginning, middle, and end, and it didn't need more than 7 to 8 hours to tell it. And so we came up with that book sort of and wrote that book. And I think, yes, of course, there's definitely a realm in which, we were also thinking, well, you could take Darby and, move her to this location, move her over to this mystery over here. And because, she's so young and has such an interesting psychological journey she's going through, there's so much room to grow. But that said, I think for us, it was like, we just want to tell this first book and see how it feels to us to tell it, and whether or not it feels like a story and a character that the world needs,
When they're trapped at the end of the world,
you have to make this life livable.
there's no going back.
But I don't think you can create any characters these days that are limited to any format or any single story. Like everything is like ongoing, it feels like. So.
That's very true. And Zal, you could kind of, the idea that she's young and that there's the line in the series that she's like the Gen Z Sherlock Holmes. And I know that the two of you and I were that elder millennial, early 80s generation. What does Gen Z mean when you're creating a character? Like, did that have a definition for who Darby is?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the iPhone fucked me up.
I actually have no idea what Gen Z is. Is that my generation?
It just changed and reordered our brains. You look at it before you go to sleep, and you look at it when you wake up. I mean, it's a cigarette. It's a drug. It's like caffeine or cigarette or whatever. And so I knew it had done that to me and to maybe other people like us. But I was looking at the people who had it since they were 11 or 12. And the idea of being like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and waking up with the phone and going to sleep with the phone. And how does that change your brain or how does that form your brain? Because you're forming your mind then. And we kind of came at it without judgment because, of course, the phone gives Darby a lot of great things, even though it also traps her from really investigating the mystery inside herself. So, Brit sort of threw down an invitation that we tell a story in which the detective evolves within the story and that her key to evolution is to solve her own mystery. And she needed to sort of get from behind the screen to do that.
I just think of it as meaning like, I guess, young, relevant, clued up.
Yeah,
I suppose.
there you go.
I don't know. To be honest, I didn't look so much into that as I did into other stuff. But I think that for me, that reference point is that she is relatable on many levels. She's not jaded and, you know, grumpy and, you know, insular as some of these detectives are, that make it quite hard, that is so compelling to watch but makes it quite hard to relate to them. I think she's quite a relatable person. You almost feel like she's been thrown into this world. She's, you know, and that I think is quite compelling.
It's so exciting to see you all here.
No escape.
And everything's billed as a limited series these days, and nobody knows what's guaranteed in the future. Did you approach this as being potentially like your, I don't know, Hercule Poirot or like Benoit Blanc, like being this detective that can just be put into different cases? Was that ever something you thought about?
Not really. It was always very much just like thinking about this in, you know, the scope of what I was handed and the scripts themselves. But you know, I think if it goes down well, I love playing Darby so much that, you know, who knows? Yeah.
And there's so many different great actors in this series, and everybody's kind of put into this one location, and it's that whodunit, that theme. Did you take any inspiration from any existing mystery stories or films or novels or anything to inspire the character?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned working with all these different actors in this one environment, and I remember Brit Zal, one of their references for us all to watch was Gosford Park. That classic sort of, you know, everyone's in this stately home and, you know, people start dying and people are figuring, it's kind of that falling out of trust with one another, and that dynamic that film was a really good reference point for. For Darby herself, the main reference was Silence of the Lambs and Jodie Foster in that. She has that sort of complex sort of way of seeing things, and this fascination with darkness and death and this person. And I think that was sort of similar to some energy that Brit and Zal felt that Darby had, and that was a really interesting reference point for me as well.
I'm here on Andy Ronson's behalf to invite you to retreat.
Your cell phone, please.
This is like half my brain.
The two of you have partnered so many times and it's created so many great things, but this is kind of the first time that you've gotten behind the camera as well. Did that change the creative relationship between the two of you now that you were helming some of these episodes?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. I mean, I think telling a story like OA as showrunners, we did a lot of a certain kind of work to realize the story. I think it felt like, because we often build worlds that are really ambitious and layered and have lots of characters and are usually, you know, low fantasy or near sci-fi, there's a lot to realize inside of the filmmaking. And so I think for me to direct, I felt very much like I have to take a step back from acting, because on this kind of story, trying to move at a TV pace to realize these worlds, it's very hard to be in front of the camera in every scene and then behind it at the same time in the way I wanted to be.
Like, I thought that it also was just a natural evolution of it. And I think really good partnerships evolve at just the right time. They don't stay stagnant. So I learned a lot from Brit as a director, because of course she's an actress. So watching her work with actors was so amazing. Like, I think there are things in Brit's episodes, there are scenes with Emma and Harris that are on a totally different register, and Brit brought that.
I think there's something going on here that we don't fully understand.
What I found really interesting is we obviously have the two sides of Darby's story. There's the past and there's the present, and how they kind of inform one another. Was that any way, did you have to reorient yourself in playing those different aspects of her life back when she was a rookie, kind of really getting started with this, versus where she is now in this intense contemporary scene?
I actually found that they were so helpful, having those two sides of herself. I felt like they really informed each other. And I really loved playing the warmth and the youth of, younger Darby. And then the slightly more suspicious, shut off, older version of Darby. And playing those off against each other. But I felt like there was a real synergy that really helped me inform both of them. Yeah.
And out of the whole cast, because again, it's a massive cast, we've got really established actors that people will recognize by name, and then you've got people that are maybe not as recognizable. Did you find that working with anybody was kind of like a bucket list moment that I got to work with this person finally?
I loved working with Harris so much. That was just like the biggest treat for me. We've become really wonderful friends, and having that sort of friendship and allyship on what was quite a grueling shoot for me because I was in every single frame and every single day was wonderful. It was always really fun when he was on set. And then, I mean, the whole cast were incredible. Working with Joan was a real like moment. And yeah, Clive as well. I think he's the most incredible scene partner, and I think him and Andy and Darby have such an interesting dynamic on screen. And that was, yeah, some of our scenes where they go toe to toe were really, really fun to do.
We don't know who did this, we don't know why, and we don't know if they are done.